But that's why I'm going to the point of people didn't feel like justice. It wasn't like, oh, we got our justice, but let's tear shit up anyway. Can I curse?
Yeah, you're fine.
People like, we just tear shit up anyway. People wanted accountability from these four officers and they didn't get it. And so, and whether we think it was fast or slow is not really the point. I'm just saying I would dispute the idea that justice was solved and we kept going anyway. The other point here that you raised, which is an interesting one, is about well, actually, let me say one more thing about the first point. The other thing here was these protests weren't just about George Floyd. They were about a sea of issues, and this was like the culmination point, which often happens in history, and we can talk about that. The other thing, though, I think about raising him to the level of hero. First of all, I think whenever someone is eulogized, right, and these were national public eulogies, we don't say, yeah, but, right? When we eulogize Reagan, right, as a nation, there were many people who chided black folk, and people on the left for criticizing policy. Say, wait, there's a time for that. But why are we criticizing him now in a time of mourning? Why are we doing this here? Why are we doing this now? So, yeah, I don't think at George Floyd's funeral we should be raising his criminal history. But again, I don't see how that's relevant to the issue here. No one was saying that he was a champion of black people his entire life. The point was, regardless of who he is, his life mattered. His life was worthy of protection. In some ways, I am actually interested to think about what it means for us to fight for someone who wasn't perfect. Because very often we only fight for the middle class, cisgendered, straight, heterosexual guy who's going to college on Monday like Mike Brown. And we have to put Trayvon on a horse to say that he didn't need to die. And it's like, that's not the point. You shouldn't have to be perfect to
Well, I
live.
think it is the point because, and this is my problem with our community, is that Black Americans are hypocrites. We are hypocrites, right? So you say, oh, well, it's not the point. Well, where were we on the issues of kids getting shot, actual innocent Black victims being killed, every weekend, every day in the inner cities? Nobody cares. If you want to give somebody a funeral and you want to have it be 5 days long, why not do that for Tyshawn Lee, the 9-year-old kid who was wearing his school uniform and playing basketball when he was lured into an alley by, an older Black man who then shot him point blank in the head 2 times because he didn't like his dad. And it was like, it was gang violence. Nobody cared. So this whole idea that there's this uprising because you care about Black lives. Don't pretend you care about Black lives. You like the political expediency of caring about a Black life, if and only when they die at the hands of a police officer or die at the hands rather of a white person, because it doesn't even have to be a police officer as long as it's a white person. But we kill ourselves faster and nobody cares. So can you name the last 10 Black people that died of homicide in this country? Because it wasn't George Floyd.
Of course not. But
why not?
So because there is let me go to the first point you made. Tyshawn Lee, of course, that's something we should be sad about. And I think Black folk are. I've never met a Black person who didn't care about Black on Black
Where are the
violence.
protests?
We can talk about the protests of that. Just let me finish this other point, though. I think when you get to Tyshawn Lee, the point is we mourn him, right? My issue with you with George Floyd was, imagine if we mourn Tyshawn Lee, we go to his funeral, and then you bring up the fact that he was a schoolyard bully, hypothetically, right? It'd be like, well, yeah, okay, maybe he was a schoolyard bully, but that's not relevant to this thing we're talking about right now. I'm okay with you talking about violence within the community. The question is, do we want to bring it up here, and what political work does it do to criticize him in that